Rain clung to the airport windows like weary tears, streaking down the glass as if the sky itself were mourning. Elise Dawson stood at gate 19, her fingers clenched tightly around the freight strap of her duffel bag, knuckles white and trembling. Her boarding pass was slightly torn, ink smudged from the water and her anxious thumb rubbing against the edges. She hadn't meant to cry, but the tears came anyway. Not the loud kind. Just quiet, defeated streams that slipped down her cheeks as the gate agent called her boarding group. She wiped them away with the sleeve of her coat, her jaw set. She didn't want pity. She just wanted to disappear. Everything about her felt misplaced, her life, her purpose, her very presence at that airport. The job at the cafe had ended abruptly when the owner closed shop. The apartment she'd fought to keep for 3 years was gone after one missed rent payment. And the grief of her mother's death still sat heavily on her chest, as if every breath had to fight its way out. Elise wasn't flying to see anyone, not really. A girl she used to know in college had offered her a couch to sleep on more out of politeness than care, but even that was uncertain. She was flying to Oregon not because there was something waiting, but because there was nothing left behind. She shuffled down the jet bridge, eyes cast low, numb to the soft murmur of other passengers and the sterile hum of the fluorescent lights. Her steps felt slow, like she was wading through a dream. Row numbers blurred as she scanned the overhead compartments. Her mind was so distant she didn't even double-check her seat number. When she reached 14C, she sank into the aisle seat without a second thought, too tired to care if it was right or wrong. She hugged her backpack to her chest and tried to make herself as small as possible. She barely noticed the man already seated by the window. He had his hood pulled low over his face, noise-canceling earbuds in, and his arms crossed loosely across his chest. He looked asleep, or at least uninterested in the world. Elise didn't care, she welcomed the silence. But the peace didn't last long. "Excuse me, dear," came a soft voice beside her. Elise turned to see an elderly woman, holding a boarding pass and peering kindly at her. "I think this might be my seat." Panic surged through Elise as she scrambled to find her own ticket. Her heart thudded in her ears, face flushing red as she read the number. 15C, 1 row off. I'm sorry," she stammered, fumbling to grab her bag. "It's quite all right," the woman said gently, trying to wave off the discomfort. A flight attendant appeared, clearly sensing the tension. "Everything okay here?" she asked with the polished concern of someone used to mid-air squabbles over armrests and carry-ons. "She was just in the wrong seat," the woman said kindly. "It happens." Before Elise could fully stand, the man beside her removed one earbud and glanced at the situation. He had striking eyes, steel blue, sharp, but not unkind. "It's fine," he said to the attendant. "Let her stay. I'll move to the aisle." Elise's head whipped toward him, startled. "No, I can." "It's okay," he interrupted, already unbuckling. "You look like you've had a long day." His voice wasn't pitying. It was even. Steady. A lifeline in a sea of chaos. He didn't look at her like she was a burden or a mistake. He looked at her like she mattered. Elise was stunned. Strangers weren't like this. Not anymore. She hesitated, blinking back fresh tears, and then sat back down. The man moved to the aisle seat, placed his earbud back in, and closed his eyes again. The flight attendant gave a small nod, and the elderly woman took her window seat beside him. As the engines roared to life and the plane rolled down the tarmac, Elise stared straight ahead, her fingers still clutching her backpack. Outside, the sky was gray, heavy with clouds. She closed her eyes and let the rumble of the jet carry her far away from everything she had lost. And yet, in that one small moment, something had shifted. She had sat in the wrong seat. But it might have been the right moment. The plane hummed steadily in the background as the city lights below began to vanish into a blanket of clouds. Elise stared at the seat in front of her, the tray table folded up, the safety card slightly askew in its pocket. She was trying not to cry again. But her body, so exhausted, so stretched by grief, betrayed her. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away before anyone noticed. Or so she thought. She felt a shift beside her. The man, the stranger who had given up his seat without a fuss, had noticed. He didn't say anything at first. Just reached into the front pocket of his backpack and took out a small pack of tissues. He handed them to her wordlessly. Elise hesitated, surprised, but took them with trembling fingers. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible over the low hum of the cabin. He nodded. "Long week?" he asked gently, his voice just above a whisper. She let out a bitter laugh through her nose. "Long year," she replied, folding into herself as she looked down at her lap. "Or maybe a long life." He didn't press for details. Instead, he turned in his seat just enough to show he was listening if she wanted to speak, but gave her the space not to. That silence, that gentle patience, felt more healing than any conversation she'd had in weeks. Elise found herself breathing slower. A few minutes passed. Then, perhaps surprising even herself, she opened her mouth and told him everything. About losing her mom. About the job that dissolved beneath her feet. The eviction notice. The couch she wasn't sure would actually be there when she landed. About how this flight wasn't an escape, it was desperation disguised as travel. And how she'd sat in the wrong seat because her brain was too clouded to focus. He listened the entire time, never interrupting, never offering hollow solutions or sympathetic platitudes. His expression didn't shift with pity, only understanding. When she finished, she felt raw but lighter. Like she had set down a heavy stone she'd been carrying in her chest. "I'm sorry," she said, suddenly aware of how much she had just dumped on a total stranger. "I don't even know your name." "Aaron," he said, simply. She nodded. "I'm Elise." They shook hands. Just a brief gesture, but something solid in a world that had felt completely unstable for so long. He leaned back in his seat then and glanced out the window, his eyes distant, as if he was chasing thoughts through the clouds. "You're stronger than you think," he said softly after a pause. "Most people would have folded long ago." Elise felt something stir inside her. A fragile flicker of self-worth she hadn't felt in months. The plane ride continued in quiet conversation and longer silences. But the kind of silences that didn't feel awkward, just calm. Comfortable. Healing. When the plane began its descent into Portland, the lights of the city sparkled like scattered stars beneath them. Elise looked out and felt the gnawing uncertainty return. She still had no real place to go. No plan. Just a name and a number on a crumpled piece of paper, someone who might let her stay a night or two. The fear crept back in. Would they ghost her? Would she end up in another shelter? Or worse? As the wheels hit the tarmac and the plane slowed to a crawl, Aaron leaned slightly toward her and pulled out something from his pocket. A business card, simple, elegant, thick stock. The name embossed in silver. Ridgewell Industries. Elise blinked. "Wait, this is yours?" He nodded. "I started it. A few years ago. Tech, mostly. But we've been expanding. Community programs too." Then, as if he were stating something as mundane as the weather, he added, "You said you wanted to matter to someone. That you wanted to do work that helps people. That kind of heart is rare. So, if you ever want to be part of something that makes people feel seen, call that number. There's a place for you." Elise stared at the card. Her fingers trembled. She looked up at him, at the man who had sat beside her quietly, gently, without pretense, who had listened, and never once made her feel small. Why?" she whispered. Aaron smiled. "Because sometimes we're given the chance to sit beside someone at exactly the moment they need to be reminded that the world still has good in it. And sometimes, we're the ones who need that reminder too." He stood, nodded once, and joined the line of people filing out of the plane. Elise sat still, the card warm in her hand. She didn't call that day. Or the next. Pride. Fear. Maybe disbelief. She ended up spending the night at the airport after the friend didn't respond. Her phone battery died. Her body ached from the floor. But the card never left her pocket. 2 days later, hungry and shivering outside a cafe, she walked into a library just to get warm. She plugged in her phone, stared at the screen for 20 minutes, then finally dialed the number. It rang once.